Hello everyone, and welcome to our final video on Faust. We have made it. So today we're going to finish up reading Faust's study, along with analyzing the last few sets of dialogue that you will need for your assignment due on Monday. So as we've been doing, we have a specific focus question, and this time we're asking ourselves this. What further characteristics of a romantic hero do we see in Faust? So these are the kind of things we're going to be looking for. Does Faust indeed fit the idea of the romantic hero that we've learned about? This dark, brooding figure who very much is into and comfortable with his own melancholy, but also that he longs for something greater than society permits for them. They will push away authority rather than embracing it, and they seek to better themselves, particularly through self-discovery. So again, we're going to read those last few pages of Faust. You can follow along on pages 892 to 894 of your literature textbook. It does sound bold, but I'm afraid, though you are clever, time is too brief, though art's forever. Perhaps you're willing to be told. Why don't you find yourself a poet, and let the gentleman ransack his dreams? And when he finds a noble trait, let him bestow it upon your worthy head in reams and reams. The lion's daring, the swiftness of the hind, the northerner's forbearing, and the Italian's fiery mind. Let him resolve the mystery, how craft can be combined with magnanimity, or how a passion-crazed young man might fall in love after a plan. If there were such a man, I'd like to meet him, as Mr. Microcosm I would greet him. Alas, what am I, if I cannot reach for mankind's crown, which merely mocks our senses craving like a star? You're in the end just what you are. Put wigs on with a million locks, and put your foot on L-high socks, you still remain just what you are. I feel I gathered up and piled high in vain the treasures of the human mind. When I sit down at last, I cannot find new strength within. It is all dry. My stature has not grown a whit, no closer to the infinite. Well, my good sir, to put it crudely, you see matters just as they lie. We have to look at them more shrewdly, or all life's pleasures pass us by. Your hands and feet, indeed, that's trite, and head and seat are yours alone, yet all in which I find delight, should they be less my own? Suppose I buy myself 6 steeds, I buy their strength. While I recline, I dash along at whirlwind speeds, for their 24 legs are mine. Come on, let your reflections rest, and plunge into the world with zest. I say, the man that speculates is like a beast that in the sand, led by an evil spirit, round and round gyrates, and all about lies gorgeous pasture land. How shall we set about it? Simply leave. A student appears outside Faust's study. When Faust exclaims that he doesn't want to see the student, Mephisto dons the doctor's cap and gown. After the soliloquy that appears here, Mephisto will pretend to be Faust, while the doctor prepares for their trip. Some 15 minutes should be all I need. Meanwhile, get ready for our trip, and speed. Faust exit. Have but contempt for reason, for science. Man's noblest force spurn with defiance. Subscribe to magic and illusion. The Lord of Lies aids your confusion. And, pact or no, I hold you tight. The spirit which he has received from fate sweeps ever onward with unbridled might. Its hasty striving is so great it leaps over the earth's delights. Through life I'll drag him at a rate, through shallow triviality, that he shall writhe and suffocate, and his insatiability with greedy lips shall see the choicest plate, and ask in vain for all that he would cherish. And were he not the devil's mate, and had not signed, he still must perish. Coming now to our last set of dialogue, we continue to see that Mephisto is trying to break down Faust's desire for this unearthly, this spiritual knowledge. And he's trying to do that because he wants Faust to give in to those passions. Remember, Faust is promised the minute that he is content with life, Mephisto can take his. So Mephisto's trying to lead him into this den of ill repute, right? Giving in to his lesser desires. The first thing we see him saying is he sarcastically is giving these compliments to Faust. And we know they're sarcastic because they are not truly reflective of what Mephisto feels. Mephisto has already shown us that he has great contempt for Faust. He doesn't like him. He doesn't like humans in general. So when he compliments him, though you are clever and upon your worthy head, he doesn't mean any of this. Both of these are examples of verbal irony. So again, we already know that we shouldn't trust Mephisto. The next thing Mephisto does then is he uses all of these sort of devices with imagery, right, and metaphors to try to get Faust to go away from these spiritual, these unearthly types of knowledge that he wants, and simply to find content in being these things. But it's very strange what he tells him. He's really not giving Faust credible advice. He's poking fun at him. And he essentially tells him, art lives forever, right? Art meaning literature, poetry. So he says, rather than chasing your tail forever for this knowledge you're never going to find, just find a poet to write all of these great things about you. And these are the types of qualities that Mephisto brings up. The lion's daring, which we would know as courage, swiftness of the hind, meaning speed, the northerner's forbearing, my Game of Thrones fans, right? Winter is coming, this idea of wisdom and looking forward, but also the Italian's fiery mind, right? Think back to Dante and his passion. So he's telling Faust, have a poet write all of these characteristics and qualities about you. But these are fantastic qualities to find in one person. Fantastic not meaning great and lovely, but meaning coming from fantasy. No one person can bear all of these qualities. And now here we see the fact that Mephisto's driving home this point, that all of these things that you long for, you can't have, right? How craft can be combined with magnanimity. Here, Mephisto is saying, leave it up to this poet to write and to figure out how cunning, right, craft, being sneaky, much like Mephisto himself, can be combined with magnanimity or this noble heart. Think of Faust, right? There's no way that we would say that Mephisto and Faust could have their same qualities that are so different be combined into one being, right? It doesn't make sense. So again, Mephisto is taunting Faust for all this knowledge that he wants to gain that he can never have. And again, Mephisto driving home the point that this type of person can't exist because he sarcastically says, right, if such a man existed, I would want to meet him. And he says, I would call him Mr. Microcosm. And we can think of a microcosm as this small system or world that contains all of these elements. In the case of Mephisto's example, these contradictions that would exist in a much larger system, right? So in this sense, Faust is wanting all of these characteristics, all of this type of knowledge that cannot be contained in one human being, right? And so here Mephisto is suggesting that Faust, right, who again is frustrated by these earthly limitations he has, would like to embody all of these characteristics that are opposing one another, again, making fun of Faust. But Faust, remember, he is our romantic hero, and he is going to dive deep into that melancholy. So rather than rising to the taunting of Mephisto, he gets rather depressed and melancholic, right? What am I if I cannot reach for mankind's crown? Here, this unearthly knowledge that he wants, this impossibility. So he says, what's the point of living if I can't strive to have what I want? But Mephisto is there very clearly and quickly with an answer for him. You're just a human. You can't change who you are. right? Make yourself look better. Put on these wigs with a million locks, he says. Or put your feet in these L-high socks. So think about maybe movies you've watched that focus on the 1700s and how the men would wear these very tight pants and then socks that go up to the knee. These are the type of socks we're talking about. So make yourself look aristocratic. It still won't change who you are, that you're simply human. Faust, though, is not going to be so easily swayed yet, right? He still is diving deep into this brooding sense of his nature, that he says all of these earthly treasures, this knowledge that I've gathered, he says he's gathered in vain. So this journey of self-discovery that he's been on up until this point has led to nothing, right? He says it's all dry. So understanding that he's dissatisfied with what he has, that he wants something greater, that he wants to become closer to the infinite. So we understand again that what he wants is to have this type of godly knowledge, a knowledge that Mephisto has promised him, and that Faust is entering into this bet, understanding that this is what he will gain. And now here we see that Mephisto is going to try to get Faust to focus more on the simple pleasures of life. Right? I said in the beginning, remember, Faust has upped the ante on their bet and has said, the minute that I am content with life, with the simple pleasures of life, you can end my life. So Mephisto is slowly leading Faust to where he wants them, right? Where he wants him. And he does that by getting Faust to question, why can't you enjoy the pleasures of life? And here he gets him to contemplate this question by giving him an example, this scenario. He says, suppose I buy myself 6 steeds or horses. He's saying that I buy their strength. So while they're doing all the work, I get to sit in the back in this chariot or in this carriage, and I get to enjoy the rush, the excitement of this speed without having to do anything. Right? Excellent use of imagery here, and Mephisto uses it to show the benefits of giving into pleasure. If you follow me, Faust, this is the type of passion that you can embrace. And so here he doesn't delay any further, and Mephisto now urges him, come on, just dive into your passions with zest, with zeal. So he's encouraging Faust to, in some sense, ignore that initial quest for higher knowledge that you wanted, and instead, let's just plunge into the world of your deepest humanly desires. And he gives one final comment. And it's interesting because he says that a man who speculates, so a man like Faust, he is like a beast that in the sand, led by an evil spirit, this is the interesting part, right? Gyrates or goes in this circle round and round. So think of a dog chasing their tail, when right next to them lies this gorgeous green pasture. And this is a simile here that Mephisto is going to use to try to get Faust to go away from this infinite. So this infinite type of knowledge that Faust longs for, Mephisto likens it to a beast chasing their own tail, when right before them, this green pasture, that passion, lies to be taken. But it's interesting that he says led by an evil spirit, because you and I both know that is precisely what Mephisto is. So we have the academic insight of understanding that Mephisto is not everything he says he is. But Faust, the deeper he goes into this melancholy, this longing for a knowledge he can never have, the more he's going to move away from understanding who Mephisto is and really just dive into following him blindly. And we see that's exactly what he does here. He no longer questions what Mephisto says, right? He doesn't even confront the fact that Mephisto himself is also an evil spirit. He says, well, how shall we do it? Right? And Mephisto says, let's just leave and set out for our journey. And he says, in 15 minutes, all we need, pack up what you need, right? But quickly. So he's trying to get Faust to go on this journey without thinking, without contemplating and using reason or logic. Because if he had, as he did in the beginning when they were first discussing the bet, Faust would see the error in this plan, right? That Mephisto himself is an evil spirit who has nothing but contempt for Faust. Here we're going to see that Faust then exits, and we're not going to see him again. And we now come to Mephisto's soliloquy. And remember, when we talk about soliloquy, this is a speech made by a character, and they do so when they are alone or perceive themselves to be alone. It's almost as if they're speaking aloud. That's how we can think of it. And here we see that Mephisto's soliloquy reveals that he plans to trick Faust, so confirming what we knew the entire time. He is saying, rather than it's a good thing to aspire to knowledge, Faust, even if you can't handle it, he says we should have contempt for reason and for science. We should spurn or push away these noble forces within you, Faust, and instead subscribe to magic or illusion. So focus on things that are not real, that do not last. And because this is a soliloquy, then we know something that Faust is now oblivious to. Okay? And more so underlining the point that we know Mephisto to be up to no good, right? He even goes so far as to say, the Lord of Lies aids your confusion, and pact or no, I hold you tight. So we know clearly that Mephisto has no love for Faust, and he's going to use the rest of the play to make Faust's life miserable. And here we get one last reference to the spirit of earth who started this whole mess for Faust in the first place. And Mephisto looks at it as a turn of fate, right? This spurning of Faust by the spirit of the earth is the whole thing that prompts this bet in the first place. And Mephisto has used it diligently, right, to push forward his bet. And finally, he's going to end with these last few phrases. And the first thing that he begins with, continuing this idea with the spirit of the earth, saying that the spirit of the earth has ignored, right, Faust. He's pushed him away, but also the spirit of the earth is symbolic for ignoring earthly pleasure as well. It's this higher sense of knowledge, right? It says it leaps over the earth's delights, but Mephisto will not. And he has said here that he's going to drag Faust through life. And he's going to do so slowly, right? And shallowly, meaning he's going to give him things that on the surface might seem to be good. But in the long run, it's not going to be what Faust desires, truly. Even more than that, the things that Mephisto is going to give Faust are going to make him writhe in pain. So imagine someone who has been tased, right? You see them jerking around on the floor. That's writhing in pain, suffocating, not being able to breathe. These are the types of experiences that Mephisto truly wants to give to Faust. And more wickedly than this, he plans to make Faust insatiable, meaning no matter how many experiences he has, nothing is ever going to be enough. That he is going to turn into someone who is greedy, right? And he's going to want to gather all of these things and experiences, and just as his prior knowledge was all gathered in vain, these passions he's about to gather on this journey will also be in vain. And then finally, Mephisto ends with this threat and this promise, right? Even if you had not entered into this bet with me, Faust, had you signed or not, I would find a way to ruin you. So we know that if we continue to read the play together, we're going to see that Faust's life is going to become hell. And it does. Mephisto is going to drag him through a number of different scenarios that cause extreme grief and extreme heartache, one of which being the loss of the love of his life. But ultimately, we do know, because we're talking about romantic literature, that it is going to end on this high note, that Faust is going to go through all of these treacherous and evil and wicked experiences, but that ultimately he is going to be saved by God. That is it for our study on Faust. So if you are actually interested in reading the rest of the play, I highly encourage it. As you can see from our friend Lucifer on the right, Mephisto is going to be primed and ready to deliver some excruciating punishment to Faust. It really is a very interesting read, and you can find the play online on YouTube as well. Having said that, we have come to our follow-up assignment. So I've posted a short worksheet on Google Classroom. It's about 5 questions long that you should answer in paragraph form. Please, just 2 points. Do make sure that you read the instructions carefully and answer all of the questions fully. Okay? One of the easiest ways to lose points is not reading the instructions and not answering the questions. Even if you're not sure that your answer is 100% correct, far better to put in something than nothing. Okay, I can't give points for blank answers. And second, please do make sure that you submit that assignment through Google Classroom by 11:59 p.m. on May the 4th. Okay, so this coming Monday. I've been lenient in terms of taking off grades for late submissions, but everyone should be used to the Google Classroom platform by now, so I will not be lenient going further. If you have any questions, please do feel free to email me or post them on the assignment page on Google Classroom. And have a nice afternoon, and I will see you for our discussion next week of our second literary movement in Europe, realism.